welcome to In 15 with Rinchin, a show where top experts share their most practical advice in 15 minutes. My name is Rinchin and I'm going to be your host. Our guest for today is Patty Aluskiwcz. Patty is an Agile coach at PwC and is also the brilliant mind behind the Agile Mindset Consulting. She comes with over 15 years of experience in enabling businesses and their employees in building fundamental Agile and Scrum skills, improving team dynamics and communications, and also helping them in change management. Today, Patty is going to talk about responding to change versus following a plan. So without further ado, let's get started. Welcome, Patty.
Great to see you again, Rinchin.
Great to see you too. So tell us, you have so much of experience in Agile, in Scrum, and today you want to talk about responding to change over following a plan. I believe that has got to do with your rich experience in change management.
Yes. And I want to take this down a little bit of a different path.
Okay.
I feel like as an Agile coach, as a former Scrum Master, as a trainer, somebody who runs Scrum and Agile workshops, there's so much focus on, the Agile value. Change is better than following a plan. But we typically talk about it in terms of executing on a project goal.
Yeah.
Right? If you think back to project management, we have the 1 to 2 years where we develop the idea, write the requirements, right? And you know how it goes. But I want to think about this in terms of our own lives. So instead of focusing on project management, and that is a kind of a dirty word in Agile and Scrum, I want to focus on how we as individuals and humans can respond to change over following a plan.
Wow, that sounds exciting. I'm all in for that as well. So tell us, Patty, how do we do that in real life?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is.
Well, I think about, growing up, being somebody who was a huge planner. And, we always talk about the American dream. I know you're in Canada. Maybe you have something similar where, you go through school, you get straight A's, you're involved in all sorts of sports and activities and clubs, you build your resume, you go to the best college, you get a job, you get married, you get the house, right? This is like the American plan. And in a lot of ways, society has changed. And the American plan, even though it's kind of still touted as a goal, we're starting to realize that in a lot of ways it's not attainable anymore. And in also a lot of ways, we don't want to do that. We don't want to follow that plan anymore. We have so many options out there of what to do with our lives. How can we overcome the societal pressures to not feel like we have to follow those milestones? And it is a bit of unlearning. And it's something that I've had to do myself. A lot of that unlearning came after, I reached adulthood, realizing that I don't want to follow that plan. And how do you come to terms with that and go on your own path and not feel the, in some ways, implied pressures to continue down that path? So what do you say to that?
I agree. I think the world is changing and everybody now has their own opinion and mindset. They have their own ideas about what their life and their dreams should look like, and it is not really following what the typical journey is as described in the success dictionary, so to say. I think one of the things that you touched upon, which I would want to dig a bit more, is that as you reached adulthood, you realized that maybe that is not the dream that you actually dreamt, but it was sort of incepted in your brain. And then there was a lot of unlearning behind it. So what did that look like for people who are in that conflict, who are struggling with that change at the moment, who have their, what I call the cocoon moment? What do you suggest? What do you think works best?
I think for me, I look at, what do I want my life to look like? What are my goals in life? And what's important to me? If, for example, travel is important to me, what does my life have to look like in order to allow me to achieve that goal? So it's less about the job or the job title, but what is it that I'm doing on a daily basis that will allow me to travel? And that's kind of just the way I wanted to wrap that up. That, that's just an example.
Yeah.
So what does that look like? I had to have the courage to say no to some opportunities,
Yeah.
even though they were there. You get the offer, or the thing comes up in your face and it's very tempting to take it. And you have to have the courage to say no, because you realize this will take me away from my goal. And I know it's a job, it's a means to an end, right? I will have the income coming in again, right? Those types of things. But will that job take me away from where I ultimately want to head? And that's not always easy, because what that makes you realize is how much fear is in your brain and how you have to shut that off. Because a lot of the things that we worry about never happen. Our brain wants to go to the worst case scenario. So, and that's where I know that, we've talked about yoga before. You talked about mindfulness with JJ in one of your previous videos. Just being aware of when the fear that's in your mind is taking over and having you make these decisions that are taking you down the wrong way, and realize that you're going to be okay.
When we are faced with situations where something conflicts with what is your inner calling and your values, you mentioned about responding to that change. And one of the things that you spoke about was a sense of awareness, of understanding that life still goes on and things will be okay, right? And another thing that you touched upon was to have that awareness of what I really want and make sure that we align and tune our lives around it. Apart from that, what else has really helped you in still continuing this path of following your, inner voice?
Well, I'm gonna say a very cliche Agile answer. It's to constantly have a retrospective with yourself. And kind of like any team that would, sit down with them as a group and have a working agreement, and you really outline where they want to take this product development, for example. Sit down and get clear with things. Write it down. And then every time you're faced with a decision, go back to that list and say, I know this is scary. And I think it's not only just writing it down, but it's speaking these things out loud to somebody else, because that's where the accountability comes in.
Yes.
And again, another Agile Scrum answer, right? The reason we have the daily stand-up, the reason that we have all of these other Scrum events is for accountability. We stand up and we say, this is what I'm going to do. And, oh, by the way, I'm stuck. Can you help me? And I think if we're asking our teams to do those things, having that retrospective with ourselves and saying, am I doing this myself? Am I walking the walk?
Yes.
And if the answer is no, then you've got to be really honest with yourself as to why. And if you need to reach out to somebody, such as yourself, somebody that you've built a relationship with, say, listen, I need some accountability. Can you help me with this? Because I really want to take my life in this direction, but it feels so uncertain. Can you normalize this for me, Rinchin?
Yes.
It's going to be okay.
What you said was so brilliant. That as agile coaches, we are constantly in this coaching stance for everyone else apart from ourselves. And the whole thing about, working agreements. In fact, that's one of the topics that we touched in one of the episodes previously, was working agreements with the business. And you actually just talked about working agreement with ourselves, our living agreement. Like having that living agreement, which is the agile goal of our life, revisiting it in a daily stand-up, understanding it, looking back at what we have done in a life retrospective, and then constantly going back to it in times where, things are turbulent or there's a sudden change in your life and you want to look back and say, oh, this is what I really want to live like. And that is what I said to myself when I was in my 100% capacity. That is so brilliant.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I feel like it's very basic. It's very simple. But the things that are simple are not necessarily the easiest things to do. Because again, we have this cultural programming that it has to be hard. We have to work really, really, really hard in order to achieve something. And I have worked hard and I don't want to deny that at all. It's something that's ingrained in me. I'm very internally motivated. However, working hard for the sake of working hard is kind of like going in circles. It's like, yeah, so we're all so busy. Great. But where are we going with all that busyness? And are we stressing ourselves out for unnecessary reasons in the meantime? What I've learned to do is, instead of building myself this huge concrete plan that I have to achieve this by this date and so forth down the path, I look in front of me and I say, what am I curious about? What do I want to learn? Where is that going to take me next? And that's the way I've lived my life, especially since I've dove deeper into agility, realizing that, just to talk about my company that I work for a moment, they are really stressing to all their employees, you need to upskill on AI.
Yeah.
And as an agile coach, like, why do I need to learn about that, right? I'm just coaching teams on behavior change. But I've started to dig deep really into studying AI, and not just, let me write a post using ChatGPT and put it up on LinkedIn. It's how do algorithms actually work? When we say the algorithm, what exactly is that? What is it doing? And I think it's important for me to understand these things in a deep way, because if I'm coaching teams, as I'm coaching teams that are building products with AI technology, I need to understand what they're up against, what they're dealing with, the uncertainties. And if I don't understand those concepts, how can I truly empathize with them? And I'm pushing myself out of my comfort zone. And that's kind of my immediate goal, is to help my teams that I'm working with. But I always keep my eye on the bigger picture. If I learn these skills, where can I take my career next? Okay. What opportunities will open up in 1, 2, 5 years for me that wouldn't had I not started studying these topics? So I don't have a plan of what I want to do next. I'm waiting for the opportunities to appear, and I raise my hand and I take them.
And you add them to your backlog, and then you prioritize them, and then you have your sprint goals in life that eventually lead to the vision, which is your life goal. Oh my God, it's such a hardcore Agile conversation without really talking about Agile. Patty, this is amazing.
But isn't that the key, right? When you're actually living this, you don't have to go around quoting the values and principles. You don't have to lecture people on, we need to do this. We need to map up to these 10 things that somebody in, out west, for me, I'm in Charlotte, somebody out west 20 years ago said that we need to do.
Yeah.
I don't need to do that. And it's really important for me to remind myself that I'm just living this and I'm modeling it for people so they don't have to be turned off by Agile Coach or Agile or Scrum, because I think in a lot of ways that those things have become synonymous with forcing ideas on people or making them do things, and people are initially very resistant if you show up that way.
So this ties back to how do we show up at work as well? By only walking the talk, not just at work, but in life as well.
Because you can't go to work and put on that face.
Yeah.
Because people will see through it. You have to live it yourself. It has to become a part of who you are. And then when you show up to work, you can just quote unquote do it. Yes. You don't have to think about it. Yes. And people will see, that it's who you are, not this mask you're wearing. And that's really important, because when we're asking the people in front of us to change because it's good for them or whatever we want to tell them, if they don't see that we're living those things that we're speaking about, what's their incentive to do it themselves?
Yes, great.
So we're going to just drop the mic here, right?
Yeah, you have already dropped so many bombs of wisdom in this conversation, starting from, what is your life vision and how people talk about agile mindset, but how do you really apply that in real life? How do you have that sort of accountability with you, and how do you partner with someone to do that? How do you have your short-term goals, and how do you revisit them based on how life is changing and where life is taking you or where the world is going? And then how do you really bring your true self to work? How did you do that in just 15 minutes, Patty?
It's taken me many, many, many years.
Yes.
Many years. And I will say, to kind of wrap this up without saying too much, I think for me, it was going through a very, very difficult time about 10 years ago, where I really fell on my butt, so to speak, and I had to pull myself up, really examine why I made the decisions I did, how they led me to that low point, and what was I going to commit to doing differently moving forward so I don't end up there again. And it was a huge learning moment for me. And even though it was difficult, I am eternally grateful for it, because I become the person that I am. And I have no idea where I would have gone had I remained that person. And it probably wouldn't have been a very good place. So I'm thankful for that.
I'm glad we're having this conversation. Thank you so much, Patty. This was wonderful. I'm sure our listeners would be delighted when they hear this, and there would be a huge smile on their face and a bigger spring in their step to do and live an agile life.
Thank you, Rinchin.
Thanks.